when he gets here. And when he does, just put him in the back and give him a Diet Coke. And if I got enough time, I'll get him out here and let him talk about. Are we on the air? Sorry about that. There's no way we can take that out. I apologize to you, you dedicated and good listeners. Well, I'm just going to dive right into it. If you know where to look, and you know I do, if you know where to look, you'll see that there's been some maneuvering going about with. It deals with a small, well, it's not that small. It's actually pretty big, but it's a small section of the marketplace in which there's been some, I don't know, I guess the best word is it's been pretty much a Cold War that kind of almost went hot between several of the EBEs that are here. And it all has to do with a certain comic book company. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there's a certain comic book company that has been putting out controversial material. They had a complete change, and really, this isn't the first change they've ever put out. As a matter of fact, I've been following these guys since the late 80s. And this is like the third or fourth, maybe the fifth time that they've made a big change. And but this time it's because of one specific event that happened, and there were some feelings that got hurt, and so there was a huge call for a major change up in the way that they were doing things, and the average comic book buyer really reacted negatively to what they did, and they weren't ready for that kind of reaction. Because it was the finances is the only way they can justify the propulsion of their agenda to the average comic book reader, because the average comic book reader tends to be a more intelligent adult, which is something that the average person who listens to this broadcast does not know. That most comic books. They think, well, hey, they're written for kids, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was the case maybe in the 50s and 60s, somewhere in the 80s. They realized that a lot of people still read comics into their adulthood, and they started writing comic books with more of adult themes. Some of the movies that have come out recently have reflected that. Things like there was a movie that came out. Sin City, that was excellent stuff. There's this film noir writer that actually took a comic book and turned it into film noir. So there's been some successful marketing behind these comic books for years for the adult audience that's been specifically targeted. Well, what happened in the early, it was really the late 80s, was when the EBEs made their first major, what word am I looking for? Their first major salvo in trying to dominate the narrative that they wanted to perpetuate for the comic book readers, because they knew that these people are of a higher intelligence. So, they want things to just stay the way that they have always been. And they realized that if the average comic book person that reads comic books, the intelligent adult, the way that they can maintain control over their thoughts and over the direction of their thinking and their politics, etc., was through these comic books. So in, I believe, 1989, 1990, there was a complete reboot of the title of every comic book that came out from this company. Big, huge titles just were completely rebooted. Fans were livid. But the way that the EBEs, and it was pretty much a pretty genius idea that they had, because one alien influential group ran one comic book company, and the one that I've been focused on today was ran by another faction of two distinct different alien races. Well, what happened was that there was a certain comic character from the other company who had a movie come out, and that movie was phenomenal. And this is genius. This is pure genius from the from the comic book companies, because this is exactly how they succeeded. They succeeded in injecting their influence over human thought through this movie. This movie that made a lot, ridiculous amounts of money. Of course, they had a special director and a special actor, of course. And if you think about it, the Germans have a word called Fledermaus. So if you can look that up, you can get an idea about the movie I'm talking about. It was humongous, and actually the franchise has gone and done several different movies and rebooted that whole. Anyway, I'm getting kind of off focus here because I wanted to explain to you, the genius behind the way that they did this was just phenomenal. It was amazing to me. So this movie comes out. The competition comic book company, they saw that all this money was being made by their sworn enemy. The people that not people, but really the company that they've been competing against their whole lives. In the symbolic kind of a binary Cold War like the United States had with the Soviet Union, these two comic book companies have had with each other. It's pure genius, isn't it? If you think about it, and your wheels start to turn, you can see the genius behind what these beings did. So the AB company and then the Marvel company. Okay, so Marvel and AB had been rivals since the early 1960s. The evolution of the Marvel company is a story for another day, but it's a fantastic and fascinating one as well. So this movie came out. Remember the word I told you? The German word is Fledermaus, means flying mouse. So if you can put two and two together, you can get the idea of the movie that came out that I'm talking about. The Marvel comic book company, they started freaking out, and so they decided that they were going to completely change their whole approach to comic book writing, and they were going to kill everything. They killed every character and resurrected it as if it was brand new. So idealistically and story-wise, they took the characters that had been for 30 years at that point. It was 1988, and Marvel company started in roughly 1960, 61. So that's roughly 28 years of character development, storylines, etc. flushed down the toilet. Now, what idiot would do something like that, right? Well, of course, it's not idiots. It's the EVEs. They saw that they had to grasp, to regain control over the cognitive narrative is the phrase I'm going to use, the word I'm going to use. The cognitive narrative that was guiding these super intelligent comic book readers. So they nuked the creative environment that they had been living in for almost 30 years. Boom, it was gone completely. So the company said, we've got to do a new direction, and that's where these two different alien groups came in. They had been very angry, because the Asgardians, also known as the Nordic aliens, were pretty much controlling the whole thing, and this just outraged the reptilians. Of course, they're not happy with anything, just about. So the reboots started. There was, creative differences and arguments between the two, but they decided to come out with a unified vision of what they wanted to do with the company, and they systematically took every book and rebooted it. And so what we had was a whole new group of people that were in their late teens, early 20s, that we're having to look at these new comic books. On top of that, the fans that have been with them for years, 60s, 70s, all of a sudden they've been just cut loose, mad as hell. What did they do? They started reading. That's right. They started reading books from the Alphabet Company, the AB Company. They got into characters from that, of course, and they pretty much had their writing down to a science at that point in time, because the alien influences that decided to take that comic book company over, they moved in the late 70s, and they had several writers from the United Kingdom that they brought in, and they brought these writers in from the United Kingdom, and they completely they didn't reboot their whole line. What they did was they took titles that weren't selling that well, and they put these genius writers in there, and we're talking Pulitzer level talent here. And so while this was going on, the people at the Marvel Company, they were just, they were doing their thing. They were coming out with comics. It had gotten into a regular old grind and everything, but the fans were loyal. The fans were loyal. So when they rebooted it, those fans were mad as hell. They were livid, and they went to the AB Company. No problem. Those books were being great. Marvel Company, always having problems. They rebooted their line again for a second time. And then just recently, they decided to do it one last time. And really, the comics that led up to that were just fantastic. They were really, the creativity that they had were doing a fantastic job. They had great artists, they had great writers, and so, of course, they couldn't have that because they weren't it's always the reptilians, to be honest with you. The reptilians were never happy with the way that they were being, what they said were representatives of their thought processes, okay? If you can read between those lines, I can't. They said the representatives of those thought processes were not, they were not representing them appropriately. So, to make everybody happy, the Asgardians agreed to reboot the title one more time. So they had this great build-up, and then all of a sudden, this one major villainous character who was sketchy to, every time they've tried to do a movie with the character, they just, he's impossible to get right. The way that he was written was so specific, and that specific comic book just cannot translate to film at all. No matter who takes the title, it's just not going to happen. So anyway, he's running that universe, and then they used that as an idea to make one giant planet where he was the king and the god of everything. He had basically the powers of God, and this is all symbolic. All symbolic. The Svengali machinations of these reptilians. So the titles, once again, are rebooted completely. Boom, nuked completely. A whole line of loyal fans, once again, angered that they were going to change it. But this time they were taking a different tact. They had seen that certain political ideations that were going on in colleges around the campus. See, they mistakenly wanted to attract young readers again. That's their big mistake, is trying to attract the younger readers, the people that are over the age of 11 and under the age of 20. That group. And the truth is that they'll never get it right, because those young people, they're into video games. That's their deal. That's their comic books. So they thought they would get, smart and appeal to these college students by developing these, what they call social justice-y characters. And I don't get into politics of this stuff, because it's a non sequitur. It doesn't matter at all. It's not important. The politics. This whole politics thing is inconsequential. Okay. If you've listened to anything that I've been saying for the past 10 years, you know that politics in this country or in the United States are, my opinion is, there's just two sides to one coin. So I'm not going to go there. But apparently it angered a lot of the comic book readers that were fans of these particular comics, and so they attempt by the reptilians to appeal to the college crowd, the neo-Marxist Leninists that are currently occupying today's campuses. Oh, and they failed miserably. I mean, I've never seen anything this drastically insane in my life. And meanwhile, while all this was going on inside the comic book division of this company, the film division had been pretty much co-opted by the humans that owned the company. There was a big company that purchased it, but it is owned primarily by humans. There are some aliens in the corporate structure there. There's nothing we can do about it, of course. But the films and some of the television stuff that's been coming out by that section of the corporation is just outstanding, making a lot of money. They learned well from the lesson in the 80s, and they're sticking to that dogma, for lack of a better word. But back at the comic book division, so they came out with roughly 8 months worth of material. And, just making people mad left and right. And then they come back with, you're racist, or, the typical response that they were trying to appeal. The people that they're trying to appeal to, they respond to this type of tact. So, the political conversation is just, it doesn't mean, it's meaningless to these people. What they want to do is they want to sell comic books that people will read. That way they can control the consumer mindset, and they can control what the intelligent comic book readers of mid and later adulthood age, their whole thought process. They can manipulate that. That's all they care about. They don't give a damn about politics. It's quite entertaining to see the political people go back and forth with this stuff. It's quite hilarious. But some of them do have a point, and really the point is those damn reptilians, man. They just don't know jack shit about what the human mind wants. They're cold-blooded, literally, and so they don't understand how the human brain works. And the Asgardians had been very patient with these people. They're telling them, look, if you want to do it this way, you're not going to succeed, but, hey, what can we do? We're just going to sit back and watch it collapse and crumble. And that's exactly what happened.